What's going on, everybody? I'm AJ, your host of the Blue to Green podcast. On this episode, I have Miss Sonia Martinez. Miss Martinez is a lawyer here in the state of Arizona that practices family law. She practices criminal law as well. She's also indigenous and she practices tribal law. So here in Maricopa County, she's also a Judge Pro Tem that goes around to the different courts and hears all different kinds of cases. And we dive into that in this episode, and she does a hell of a lot better job of explaining what she does and what she is than I do. She's also an open cannabis consumer and a cannabis advocate in a smart, safe, and responsible way. So I hope you enjoy what you're listening to, and let me know what you think. Take care, everyone. Yeah, this is not.
Like, are we pretending there's an audience? Right?
No, this is not a kitschy. All right, everybody. No, nothing like that.
That was pretty good, though.
All right, so we're going. So, hello, Sonia.
Hello. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I am great. Thank you for having me. It's good to see you again.
Thank you very much for making the drive down here. I sincerely appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's always good. It's always a pleasure to work with you. We've worked together on a couple of different, educational programs, in the past and in person. So it's good to see you again.
Thank you. So I just wanted to do a little background on you and, find out, just give your background into the law, the legal system, and all that stuff.
Sure. So my name is Sonia Martinez. I own the law office of Sonia Martinez. I opened up my firm technically I opened up my firm in 2008. However, the firm at the time was a partnership with my now ex-husband, Mac Nayeri, who is a fantastic immigration attorney. So if anybody ever needs immigration help, don't hesitate to call Mac. But I've been on my own since 2008.
Nice.
I've been licensed since 2004. My first license was in the state of California. I've been in Arizona for the past 16 years. I'm also licensed in, 8 to 9 different tribal courts. So I do practice in tribal courts as well as state of Arizona courts. And I know one thing you had mentioned earlier, while we were offline, was the fact that I was appointed recently, about 2 years ago, as a Judge Pro Tem to the Maricopa County Justice courts. So that's also something I do. I still run my law office full time. But I also do the pro temming as a judge. So I do that on a part-time basis and enjoy both of those things.
So let's go back just a little bit more. Where are you from originally?
So I was born and raised in a city called Southgate, California. Southgate is basically in southeast Los Angeles.
Okay.
For people who don't know about that area, I generally ask if they have ever heard of Compton and Watts.
Yeah.
And Southgate is essentially the city right next door. It's interesting how those cities were segregated. Even when I was living there, Compton and Watts was primarily African Americans. Southgate was primarily Latinos, but Mexicans specifically. You go to the city next door, there were Salvadorians, and that sort of thing. So originally from Southgate, got my degree at Southwestern University School of Law in Los Angeles, California. The cool thing about Southwestern Law School was that it is, I believe, still the only program in all of the law schools across the nation that is a program specifically oriented toward parents.
Okay.
So the people in that program, it's a 4-year program, were essentially parents.
Oh, cool.
So it's not just a regular part-time program oriented toward, a group of specific type of people.
They understood the challenges of people that can't go to school full-time and all that, so they geared it towards parents that have dual roles, essentially.
Exactly.
Cool.
We also had a nighttime program for, the second career people and things like that. But the police program was fantastic. So I got my law degree in 2004, first out of California, practiced in California for a bit, and then moved to Arizona in 2006, started working for a large insurance defense firm.
Okay.
Realized that probably, that really wasn't the way I wanted to go. I really didn't feel like I was helping people the way I really wanted to help people in the legal field. So I started my own practice and 14 years later.
What led you to want to become a lawyer?
Well, let me tell you the story as efficiently as possible. I was 7 years old. I was awake. It was very late at night, living in Southgate, California, and I heard a lot of noise in my driveway. I looked outside the window to see police officers basically beating the living crap out of my older brother.
Oh, wow.
And I thought to myself, what the hell? So I yelled out, that's my brother, leave him alone. And I still remember to this day, the officer turning his head toward me, looking at me, grabbing my brother's hair and smashing my brother's head into the cement.
Wow.
I yelled for my mother, who then came. Eventually, the incident went away. And I think a week or two later, I was in second grade at the time, and there was career day. If you remember career day, I don't know if they even have that sort of stuff anymore, but I was at career day, and my teacher's husband, my teacher was Miss Kaufman, and her husband was actually an attorney for the city of Los Angeles. He told us all about what it means to be an attorney. And one of the things he said is that he helps people with problems. Specifically, he helps the city of Los Angeles and the agencies with their problems. So you can help people or, cities or agencies. So I remember raising my hand and asking him if, as a city of Los Angeles attorney, he helps the police department and teaches them how to treat people properly, because my brother had just been beaten up. And he told me that I could be a lawyer and go into the law. And specifically, he told me about being a criminal defense attorney. So ever since then, I have wanted to become an attorney specifically to help people. I really was very attracted to criminal defense and still am and still do criminal defense. As a matter of fact, in college, even before law school, I wrote my honors thesis on the Fourth Amendment and the evolution of the Fourth Amendment search and seizure law. So my love for law and justice started when I was 7 years old because my brother was being beat up.
Was it the LAPD?
It was Southgate Police Department.
Okay, so they had their own police department.
They had their own police department. And to be clear, I am Latina and I'm indigenous as well. I'm from the Pascua Yaqui tribe. Okay. My older brother, so just for anybody out there, my older brother looks white as white. The light hair, blue eyes. So I'm not necessarily saying he was this Latino being beat. I have no idea why he was, why the officers were treating him that way. But I wanted it just to make clear. I don't think it was necessarily because of race, because he wasn't the typical Mexican looking guy, but that definitely changed my life. To be clear, I absolutely trust and respect law enforcement. 100%. Law enforcement in a general sense are individuals that I work with on a regular basis in various different ways. There are definitely individuals in law enforcement, just as there are individuals in many different fields, including the law, that are naughty and don't do the right thing.
Right. Yeah.
So I just wanted to note that as well.
Well, and I'm glad you said that, because a lot of times there's this whole defund the police movement, and I'm former law enforcement, you know that, and people who watch this do. But the thing that I've always tried to explain to people is that by lowering the standards and defunding police, you're going to get worse and worse and worse trained cops. You're going to get worse out there. And I do believe that there needs to be a balance between helping in the community, but they have to be, an officer needs to understand the Fourth Amendment to the fullest extent in order to not infringe on people's rights, in order to understand how they have to behave. And I'm a huge advocate of substantially more training for law enforcement, but more training means more money, and that's kind of a hard thing for people to understand. They need the training. If they don't understand how they're violating people's rights, they're not going to understand that they're violating people's rights. So that's just been my take on it this whole time, is that it's like we don't need to defund the police. We need to fund them more. We need them better education. We need higher standards. I've said it before that if somebody breaks into my backyard and has a gun, I have a back disability. I'm not going to be chasing these people anymore. I want to pick up the phone and call 911, and I want the biggest, baddest, smartest cops that know what they're doing coming and helping me. So that's been my take on it. So
absolutely. And I think that I know this show is not about defunding the police, but it is important as respects what the different things that we're talking about, including justice, cannabis, and different areas of the law. And I think that you see in different areas of the country where they have defunded police and prioritized in different ways, you are seeing a significant increase in crime. You see that in California. You see smash and grabs.
Yes.
You see car break-ins on a very regular and consistent basis. All that being said, I don't know, to be quite frank, I don't know what the answer is. I'm not an expert in this, but I definitely know that I appreciate the police for many different reasons, and do feel that different training and different programs need to be utilized, cultural competency, and all sorts of different things. For example, I was in a program just recently. It was about trauma and teaching, as lawyers, how to teach judges about your client and any trauma. And, so for example, a lot of people appear as if they are lying. They're on the stand and they don't make sense. Their behaviors don't make sense. And a judge looks at them, hears their testimony, and thinks, well, you're just lying because that makes no sense. Your behaviors make no sense. In reality, their behaviors make perfect sense if you understand trauma.
Amen.
So that's just an example of what you're talking about when you talk about training and education, we're not talking about just, hey, know what Fourth Amendment law is and know what it means when you say you have to be able to articulate specific facts
Right.
to create reasonable suspicion and or probable cause for arrest. There's that sort of training, but there's also the training involved in cultural competency, trauma, mental health, and all those other sort of things. So lots to do.
I can't speak specifically anymore. I've been out of the game for 5 years, but I can tell you that 5 years ago, everything you just said, there was none of. There was no training, and I worked for the second largest police agency in the state of Arizona. We had tons of money. We could get brand new cars. We could get brand new tasers. We could get brand new guns. We could get all the cool toys on the bat belt. But the actual training for the mind and understanding trauma, and not only that, but understanding their own trauma as to what they're seeing every single day, there was no training for that. There was no understanding cultural differences. I got very involved in human smuggling and busting human smuggling. And my boss was Hispanic. He was Mexican, like from Mexican. I'm not using racial terms here. And so I had multiple, in the very beginning when I started getting these human smuggling loads, he would come down and translate for me. And then he started explaining, and he grew up in Mexico. And he started explaining to me that when I was talking to a subject, why this person would not look me in the eye. And it was a total cultural difference.
Yeah.
And then him as a Mexican man coming on scene and talking to them, they would treat him completely differently. And they weren't lying. It was just a cultural difference that we didn't get any of that training. There was none of that type of stuff.
Exactly.
So it's just a total lack of funding, and it's a lack of understanding. Yeah. And it can definitely amp a cop up, though. It can definitely make them go, oh, this dude's lying to me, you know, and then not trust him, and then it can go downhill from there.
Absolutely. So lots to do, lots to learn, and lots to figure out moving forward for sure.
So I kind of want to go back. So what type of law do you practice now?
My primary area of practice is what I call generally family. When I say family, I'm talking about custody, divorces. I represent parents in DCS matters.
Okay.
I represent tribes in ICWA matters, so that if, our tribal members ever move stateside and their babies are removed from them while they are living in the state versus on the reservation, we enter an appearance in stateside proceedings and try to get the, case back over to tribal courts,
okay,
where again, there is some cultural competency, because when you're dealing with dependency and parents' behaviors and different things like that, especially with tribes, there is definitely a cultural difference. As a matter of fact, we even have federal law that makes it very clear that Indian children and Indian families are treated different. That's the Indian Child Welfare Act.
Okay.
So primarily family, if you will. I also practice criminal defense, and I have been hired throughout the years as a conflict prosecutor. So I say that I don't pick sides. I'm not a prosecutor. I'm not a criminal defense attorney. What I am, though, is a person who does justice. But primarily, I do criminal defense. Right now, I do have a case on one of the reservations where I am prosecuting child abuse cases. So there's that as well.
So, okay, you just said, so you do criminal defense, but then you said conflict prosecutor. I've actually never heard of that term.
So sure. Well, different tribal prosecutors' office, they are not able to prosecute certain individuals for various reasons because there's
conflicts of interest.
Conflicts of interest.
Okay.
So then they will pull in somebody from the outside who, is not biased, doesn't have any interest in the game, doesn't know the individuals. And so on this particular matter, there was a conflict, and they brought me in to prosecute essentially child abuse cases.
That's really interesting. I think, again, in my background, all I dealt with was prosecutors, and the criminal defense attorneys were scumbags. You know what I mean? That's the culture. That's the culture that was bred into it. So sorry, Tom Dean. I know that we had you on, but I love you. You're not a scumbag. So, but there's definitely been a shift since I have been out of law enforcement in my mentality and understanding that it's just following the letter of the law.
Absolutely.
It's following the letter of the law. It's not right. It's not wrong. I have some reservations regarding how could certain individuals defend certain individuals, understanding the severity of the cases. But again, it's just about understanding that law enforcement has rules to play by. The government has rules to play by, and they need to be held accountable. And the number one thing I can tell you that I got my ass kicked one time in a domestic violence trial, and it was a brand new prosecutor. I was a state trooper who had never once done a domestic violence case, and I did it all wrong, but I didn't know that. And then when I got my ass kicked by this particular attorney, it made me a better cop. It made me understand certain things and what I should have done, how I screwed up and all that good stuff. So I not a lot of officers think that way. They just think that guy was an asshole. They just got the guy off. It's like, no, I didn't do my job. I didn't do my job to the best of my ability. So
Absolutely. And a good defense attorney teaches you that at a motion to suppress evidentiary hearing, where you are being questioned as to this, your specific articulate reasons why or why not you didn't stop somebody or search somebody or et cetera, et cetera. As a judge pro tem, I've presided over numerous evidentiary hearings dealing with officers who are witnesses. And I will tell you right now, I remember one in particular where all I thought during the proceeding was, wow, this officer was not prepped in any way, shape, or form. How embarrassing. Yeah. I remember looking at the prosecutor thinking, this is the question you need to ask, hoping hoping that the prosecutor would be better at his job, and he wasn't. Don't get me wrong, the defense attorney wasn't that great either, but I just remember thinking and seeing how unprepared that officer was. Yeah. And what's interesting, I'll just say it in a general sense, I've seen that officer at other evidentiary hearings. Okay. So it makes me think, is it something with that officer not trained properly, or is it that this officer is just not being prepped by the prosecutors? Are the prosecutors even competent to prep their particular officer? What happens a lot of times in Maricopa County is, especially when you're at the lower level, you are having one or 2 year new prosecutors who are just kind of right out the gate without all the proper training. But to be clear, let me also be clear, I have seen the most experienced and competent prosecutors as well in the justice courts. So
I was just going to ask, so you're in the justice of the peace courts?
Correct. Okay. So I pro tem for the justice of the peace courts. For those of you who are not familiar with the justice courts, there are 26 justice courts in Maricopa County. They're divided into, geographical sections, and any of the 26 courts could call me to have me go ahead and preside whenever their judge has a conflict, isn't available.
You're not stuck to one particular justice of the peace?
Not at all. Not at all.
What kind of cases do you see as a judge pro tem?
As a judge pro tem in justice court, we handle all civil matters that are under $10,000 with the exception of declaratory relief actions. And within those, we do handle all evictions. Most evictions, your typical evictions are in justice court because most of them are for under $10,000. Although with the rents right now, there's a lot more evictions in Superior Court with the over $10,000.
Really?
Absolutely. The rents are housing is changing for sure in Arizona and especially in the Phoenix area. With respect to other justice court proceedings, we preside over misdemeanors. To be clear, though, the criminal matters that we preside over are matters through the sheriff's office, through the Department of Public Safety. Right. So if it's, East Mesa Court, for example, doesn't handle cases where the city of Mesa police officers, it's the Department of Public Safety. So justice courts, it's essentially they're the county, people on freeways and things like that. So depending on which justice court I cover, the cases could very well be different. For example, in East Mesa, I have a lot of fish and game. Okay. While there's no there's no fish and game in downtown justice court, for example.
I gotcha. So there's geographically, they're going to be closer to where they patrol, which is out in the nether regions.
Exactly. Or you see a lot of, certain courts, there's a JP court where there's a lot of DUIs and a lot of extreme DUIs. Yeah. I see that very often and very regular. Certain justice courts where there's a lot of gentrification, housing gentrification, you see a significant load of evictions for non-renewals. Okay. So not for non-payment of rent, just, hey, you're on a month-to-month now, and we're just not going to renew because we're going to condemn this building. We're going to sell it off. Okay. We're going to build it up and, start charging people 4 times the amount. So it definitely is interesting to see the different justice courts. Let's see what else. That's primarily it. So anything civil. And I've dealt with a whole variety of civil. As a matter of fact, recently I presided over a trial involving a federal law, the Telemarketer Protection Consumer Act, where if you get on the no-call list and then you put yourself on the no-call list, but a company then still calls you, you actually could get up to $500 per call. And if it's willful, you could get up to $1,500 per call if you could prove that the company initiated these calls to you after knowing you were on the do not call list. So,
I'm going to start writing the numbers down as they call me and keep a list of them. Nice.
So we preside over all those different types of things, including I had mentioned orders of protection. Okay. Injunctions against harassment, injunctions against workplace harassment. So we handle all of those matters as well.
Okay. Cool. How did you get assigned for the judge pro tem? Did you apply? Were you picked?
So my shoulder was tapped
Okay.
by one of the justices there, one of the JPs. So there are the JPs, but justice courts also need a variety of judge pro tems. They need 20 to 30 because there's 26 justice courts. Judges are busy. They have they get sick, other things. So they needed a list of judge pro tems. What justice courts were looking at in Maricopa County a few years ago, they were looking at diversifying the bench.
Okay.
Making sure that the bench reflected the communities that they were presiding over. So a few different judges, included the judge who tapped my shoulder, was looking specifically for awesome, competent attorneys.
That's
just saying, that have been in practice for a significant amount of time.
okay.
That were probably also litigators, so attorneys that have been in the courtroom, who, in addition to all that, in addition to having all the qualifications, also being a little different in terms of background, in terms of either race, color,
Gotcha.
or something other. And for me, I'm a Latina and indigenous woman, so I don't know if you could get any more diversified than me. I think all I need to be is gay, and I'm not. But aside from that, I've pretty much got it all. So in terms of diversification,
I think it's important in this day and age to actually talk about race, and I think it's important to talk about it in a way to understand each other. Were you offended at all when they came to you because of those specific qualifications, or did you see it as a necessity?
Absolutely. So not offended at all, because here's the thing. I absolutely know for a fact that I'm competent and qualified.
I know
Number
that.
one,
I
right?
know that to be true.
So it's kind of like when I, got the full scholarship to Cal State Long Beach. Did I get it because I was, a Latina indigenous? No, I got it because I graduated salutatorian in my high school class and this, that, and the other. On top of all that, I get to say I'm also a minority.
Yeah.
So, there's that. So absolutely not offended. I would be offended if I was picked and wasn't qualified and picked only because of my race or my gender. That would offend me. Or not offend me, but I would just think it's just dumb. Like, you should pick me because I'm competent and to do the job.
I agree with that.
So I just kind of have this extra added bonus of being, indigenous and Latina.
And you get to see things from a different perspective because of that.
Not just me, but the people in my courtroom. Could I tell you, AJ, my goodness, when I walk into the courtroom, especially if it's in a Latino or indigenous community and the people in the courtroom look like me, I can't begin to tell you the look on their faces. Their shoulders drop. There's just a little bit of extra comfort. They still don't know. They don't know how I'm going to act. But when I sit down and I look like their sister or their auntie, you know what I mean? There's a different feeling for these individuals. There really is. And I've been told that many times, not just because of how I look necessarily, but because of how I treat people. I literally, and I'll give you an example, it's kind of funny example, but I had a 1:30 calendar where all of the criminal matters were set for 1:30. And there are about 20 people in my courtroom. So I tell these individuals when I get in, it's 1:30, folks. You're all set for 1:30. Ugh. You're not all going to, be heard at 1:30, obviously. Some of you may not be here till 1:45, 2:15, 2:30. I apologize in advance. This is the calendar we have. Thank you for your patience. We get to 3 o'clock is when the calendar is ending. Yeah. At 3 o'clock, there's a last guy there, right, by himself. So I said, hey, it's 3 o'clock, save the best for last. And he comes running up the aisle, quick little cute jog. And he's, he looks like coming down from The Price is Right.
Come on down.
Come on down. And he comes down. We do a real quick arraignment. 3 minutes later, he says, Your Honor, I just want to tell you, we're off the record already. He's about to leave. And he goes, Your Honor, I just want to tell you, I didn't mind being last. That was quite not just entertaining, but you really respect people.
That's awesome.
And thank you. Really, thank you. And he walked out of there, did whatever he did for the rest of the day. But I just remember thinking, wow. I mean, this poor guy had to just sit in this courtroom for hours.
That's quite a compliment.
And he thanked me.
Yeah.
So I absolutely think it's a necessity to have competent, qualified judges who look like the people in the courtroom.
And you know what? And at full honesty, that's something I just don't understand. I've never had that issue. I've never had that understanding or anything like that. So, and again, it's good to hear this, and it's good to understand that, it's necessary. It's not just old white guys that get assigned to the bench, that get voted into the bench. So that's awesome to hear. That's great to hear.
And it's a good experience. So I've enjoyed it. It's my second year.
Awesome.
I'm enjoying it for sure.
Do you think you want to go full time as a JP?
Not anytime soon. My life situation, my time in practice and all that. I don't think I want to do anything full time, in terms of a judgeship for a bit.
Okay.
For a bit. Yeah, I have a lot of other things that I'm going to get into first.
Oh, nice. Very nice. So the one thing that has been interesting about you, though, as well, is that you're an open cannabis user as well.
Absolutely.
So how has that affected you? Has it affected you at all? When this judgeship, has anybody... And again, I asked this question because one of the things that I'm trying to show people is that you can be completely successful and use cannabis. And you can have intelligence and articulate and well-spoken and use cannabis, because there's still that stigma from the other side that just doesn't understand that. They think you're a loser, or that you're just sitting around smoking weed all day long and don't understand.
Yep, there's definitely a ton of stigmas, and I think there are a ton of stigmas that are going to continue so long as individuals are not educated or do not want to be educated. So a couple things. Yes, I am a cannabis consumer. I've been consuming cannabis for, quite frankly, for a very long time. I've always used it in my opinion in a very safe and responsible manner, and I think that's key. I think when I teach this and I preach this and I promote this, safe and responsible use is the way to go. It's a substance is a substance. So for example, alcohol is legal, but could you use it in a very unsafe and irresponsible manner? Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I see that all the time, right? Sugar.
Amen.
Sugar is a substance. Could you use it in an unsafe and irresponsible manner? Absolutely. I mean, does sugar impair you? No, not necessarily, but cannabis is an impairing substance. So I think the issue with cannabis is that is an impairing substance, and people get nervous about that impairing their brain.
Right.
And what that means and how much it could affect them. Not realizing that, I mean, although sugar cannot impair you to where you're loopy and, can't drive on sugar type of thing, but I think that the key again is safe and responsible use. I have always behaved in that way. I do not consume and then get in the car and drive.
Right.
I do not consume and expose children. There's a variety of different behaviors. Some may not agree with me. There are a lot of people who don't agree with my definition of what safe and responsible is. But, I will make it clear that my consumption has been safe and responsible. In terms of has it ever affected me, not negatively, but I'll give you, just for an example, as a Judge Pro Tem recently, I was presiding over an evidentiary hearing, and I was just talking with the prosecutor and defense attorney before we went on record, and the prosecutor looked at me and he goes, Judge Martinez, are you still doing that cannabis stuff? Right before the hearing. And I looked at him and I said, excuse me, what do you mean that cannabis stuff? And he goes, like the cannabis stuff, you do that still? I couldn't understand what his question was. And so I said, sir, are you asking me if I'm still the vice president of the Arizona Cannabis Bar Association? Yes, I am still the vice president of Arizona's Cannabis Bar Association and have been since its inception in, 2017. Is that your question? Yeah, that's my question. Yep, I still am.
Okay, yep,
If you like to become a member, we have prosecutors as well in our group.
Interesting.
So, in that way. But
do you think that they were fishing?
I think that he looked me up.
Yeah.
Googled my name to figure out what sort of attorney I was, who I was, so that they could be better prepared to be in front of me. And quite frankly, that's a very responsible and good thing to do. I look up every judge that I'm about to get in front of when I have a case. The first thing I do when somebody calls me and has an already pending case, I say, "What's your case number? I'm going to look up your judge.
Yep.
I want to figure this out." So, in that way, but I'm not one who you will also not see me very often, if at all, go to marijuana-based events.
Right.
I'm not smoking in public. Again,
Right.
It's the safe and responsible use. Once in a great while, I'll go to an event. Once in a great while, I'll be in a room where I'm taking a little puff. But for the most part, my use is at home, in my bedroom, in my backyard, before I go to bed.
Right. Understood.
You know, things like that. So
One of the hard things, I mean, I've lived in obscurity as a police officer for many, many years. And so now I'm involved with Arizona Normal, and they go to a lot of events, and Arizona Normal holds all these clinics and all that good stuff. And they go to all these events, and I've lived in obscurity, and I don't want my name or face out there. Well, all that's gone to hell since I started the podcast. Obviously, I don't care anymore. But that has been, I still am extremely hesitant to consume in public just because of the perception and just because of the misunderstanding and how it could be mischaracterized. And I mean, in full disclosure, I hired you a couple of years ago for a custody matter. And so, that's one of the things that, even though completely responsible and completely legal and all that good stuff, it's like, we still don't want to show any part of this just because of the misconception. It can be used against you, unfortunately. And judges who don't have any history or background I would assume could use that against you, and the misunderstanding behind it and the lack of knowledge and the lack of education on it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, as open as I am, I'm also very mindful.
Yeah.
And again, safe and
responsible.
So there is all that. And again, I've been using cannabis for quite a while, I've said this before and I'll say it again. One thing cannabis did help me with and has helped me with is anxiety.
Okay.
I do know that cannabis also causes anxiety.
Yes.
I'll be quite frank. I have definitely used cannabis and cannabis products that caused me and created anxiety. But overall, it helped with anxiety, which allowed me to, for example, in law school, stay calm, collected, and thrive, and graduate at the top of my class in law school.
Nice.
While using cannabis. But again, I'm not going to school stoned.
Right.
I'm not taking tests stoned. I am using the product when I need to and thriving. I'm not saying the product caused me to thrive. I'm saying it has created different dynamics in my mind and in my body, which has allowed me to put my best foot forward. And it has been helpful. I absolutely very much appreciate cannabis and what it has done for me in my life. 100%.
Awesome. And the background that I had was cannabis is bad. It's the typical, reefer madness mindset. And I had experimented a little bit as a kid. As a teenager, I'd used a little bit. I had to admit to when I got hired on with law enforcement. I had to admit when I went to the military, I went for a top secret clearance, a top secret SCI clearance. I had to admit to my usage. And then I also had to admit in law enforcement. And I'm telling you right now, the people who I had conversations with other officers back in the day who had admitted to it, we got freaking random drug tested all the time. But the people who never did admit to it, or who said they didn't, they never got drug tested. But it's understanding the stigma behind it, and again, the propaganda, and it's just been hard. I mean, I didn't start using regularly until 5 years ago when I had my back injury. And then when I started using it responsibly, I have nothing against anybody who wants to use it for recreational. I have a blast, but I have an affinity towards the patients because I'm a patient myself. I have an affinity towards those who are using it, and then understand that it does help with mental issues. And I mean mental issues as in like anxiety, depression, and that type of stuff.
Sure.
And I started realizing when I started using it that all of the trauma that I had to deal with in law enforcement started to come out. And there was PTSD. I have PTSD, PTS. I don't like to call it disorder. But there's also post-traumatic growth. There's post-traumatic stress growth that has occurred after the traumatic event.
Love it.
And one of the things that I'll fully admit this is that I was late at night, back's killing me, go smoke some, and I'm sitting in my kitchen, and next thing you know, I'm actually processing and dealing with emotions from an event that happened several years before that I had no clue I was dealing with. They were suppressed and hidden and all that. And it was cannabis that actually helped me work through this particular issue. Not ever going to sit here and say, I'm cured. It cured me. Yeah. No. It just helped me process some things.
Yeah. Cannabis definitely brings issues to the surface.
It does.
To allow you to work on them 100%. But cannabis, if used irresponsibly and unsafely, could further quash mental, bury it deeper. And so again, it's the safe and responsible use, because I've seen people actually absolutely use cannabis and hide from themselves.
Amen.
Hide from their pain. Yep. And seem like the typical stoner.
Yeah.
And to be clear, let's be clear, the variety of people, tend toward marijuana. Mm-hmm. But there's definitely a large section of individuals who tend toward marijuana. that have some mental or behavioral health needs,
Yes.
right? Whether diagnosed or undiagnosed.
Yes.
And so I think you saw a lot of that where people would consume and would not do their best because they would be consuming unsafely and irresponsibly.
Yes.
And so what I think the media did would play up a lot of those types of stories. Because think about it. Do you think that for a long time I admitted to consuming? You couldn't admit
Hell no.
to this. So the professionals, the competent professionals that had safe, stable, consistent lives, but that also used marijuana weren't telling people.
Right.
So you weren't hearing the stories about people like me or a professor that I know or some of the top lawyers or judges that I know. I'm not going to name any of these people.
No, yeah.
Or doctors that I know that consume safely and responsibly. Those people were never telling their stories. You were only hearing about the stoner whose car, hit a wall, or the stoner who forgot their kids in the backseat, or
Yes.
Those are the stories you heard. So I'm glad that there are other individuals like me that are now coming out and saying, hey, I do use cannabis. I use it safely and responsibly. There's nothing wrong with it. As a matter of fact, AJ, do you know Kathy Inman?
I know the name. Help me out here.
Kathy Inman. She's one of the, Kathy, I call her my pride and joy. Kathy Inman is up. She used to run an organization called Mom's Force. Kathy Inman started essentially cannabis activism in Arizona, in my opinion, with Mike Weiser.
Okay, I think she was
She
one
was
of the...
with Normal. She was one of the founders of Normal in Arizona.
Yes, okay. I'm tracking now. I got you.
So I see Kathy Inman years ago, 15 or so years ago, promote, and I see this blonde-haired, blue-eyed, blonde, mid-30s, 40-year-old woman looking as innocent as could be, talking about how she uses cannabis. And I just remember in public, and I remember thinking, well, only a white woman could get away with that. But I also thought, holy shit, this normal looking woman is talking about using cannabis. And I just remember thinking, I wish I could do that.
Right.
But then I jumped to what I just said. Well, only a blonde haired, blue eyed, white woman could do that. Then I met her. And I met different individuals from Normal, and this was 15 years ago.
Okay.
And I thought to myself, I could do this too. And so actually how long ago was this? This was forever ago. I was working with, what's this gentleman's name? Essentially with the campaign, and I then became all of a sudden the president of Parents for Responsible Marijuana Use when we were trying to pass, was it Prop 205 or?
You're talking about back in 98 or whatever?
No, I'm talking about in the 2000s sometimes. Okay. But, all of a sudden I just remember Kathy Inman, I think really was, I think the opening door for a lot of people to come out of the closet, if you will, because I know she was for me. She absolutely was for me. And ever since then, I've been... It's about 2010. Yeah.
Nice.
Making it clear that it is okay to use cannabis safely and responsibly.
Amen. I can tell you the terminology that you just used. I'm not gay. I have a ton of gay friends, and I've listened to their stories, and they've told me about them growing up and them being in the closet. And I don't have that particular experience. The closest that I could ever possibly come to is the fact of admitting to the fact that I use cannabis. And it was scary. It was very, very scary. It was very, very scary to come out and make myself known that I use cannabis. And the funny thing is, though, is that I recently met up with a buddy of mine who's still a police officer. And we just, hey, how are you? It's been a long time. Blah, how's everything going? This or that. And I said, things are going fine with Normal and blah, blah, blah. And he goes, trust me, we all know AJ's on the weed train. It's like, nice. So I was like, I have no doubt that they think that I used back then, which I never did. I never touched the stuff when I was in law enforcement. Yeah. But it's definitely come out, but it's scary. It's scary as hell for someone who's never admitted to anything like that because of the fear of repercussions, the fear of the fact that you still have law enforcement out there that thinks because you smoked a month ago, the metabolites are in your system now, and therefore you must still be stoned and you're impaired. Yeah. So one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about those two is you mentioned, you see justice of the peace. Have you seen any DUIs, marijuana DUIs?
Have I seen DUIs, or are you asking me if I have signed off as a JP on multiple summons for marijuana DUIs? Because the latter question is yes, I have.
Yeah.
As a JP, one of the other things we do is we have law enforcement come in with summons and complaints, or propose summons and
Okay.
complaints. And a lot of those are DUIs.
Okay.
Marijuana DUIs. I have them swear under oath. We get the facts, we get the information, and if I believe there is probable cause to issue a summons and complaint for a marijuana DUI and what they call the A3, a drug DUI, or an A1,
Right.
DUI
28-1381 A3.
A1 or A3, then A3 is the drug.
Right.
Yeah, I'm signing off. I'm signing off as the JP, and yes, I have signed off on. I'm gonna get a lot of heat for this, but yes, folks, I have signed off on multiple complaints for marijuana DUIs. Absolutely. Yep. If the facts are, if the probable cause is there, I have to follow the law. As much as
Amen.
as much as I want to pretend that I don't know, I have to follow the law, and if there are probable cause, there's probable cause. Period. And then at that point, it's up to a defense attorney to work the case.
Do their job.
And do their job. As a JP, I've also presided over many individuals who have come into my court on an arraignment for a drug DUI, marijuana DUI. I remember one particular individual, and I'm basically telling him at his arraignment, hey, nothing wrong with marijuana, sir. The rec adult use or rec law,
Right.
whatever you want to call it, passed. Nothing wrong with using it, but you need to be more mindful as to when you use it
Right.
compared to when you get in the car. You have to remember, you can't just smoke away, sir, and then get in your car. And in response, he says, "It wasn't even smoke, Your Honor. It was edibles."
Stop talking.
Yeah. And he goes, "And it didn't even affect me till about an hour." I said, "Sir, no need to tell me the story. It's okay. Save that for your criminal defense attorney. But let me just say this. The last thing you want to do after having edibles, sir, is get in a car."
Right.
So that's all.
You got
Have a good day.
You got about 20 minutes to survive, depending upon how much you took.
Have a great day.
This is an interesting subject because I enforced DUI law, and I did not make it to a DRE. I made it to the level of a ride, which is advanced roadside impairment. And I have had people tell me you cannot be DUI on cannabis. And I'm a cannabis consumer, and I'm telling you right now, and my personal belief is you can absolutely be driving under the influence of cannabis. There's times where, again, there ain't no way I'm getting anywhere near my vehicle because I know I've consumed too much. And one of the conversations I've had is that the law enforcement community is still using old data regarding alcohol. And the roadside fields or standardized
The FTSS is the field
SFSTs,
sobriety
yes,
testing.
Thank you. Woo, I should
Yes.
be able to say that. But it's been difficult to have this conversation. Cops think, oh yeah, you're stoned, you're high, you're gonna be impaired and all this good stuff. And I don't think the science has caught up. The science is not caught up. The training is not caught up. But I also will not advocate ever for anybody smoking and saying, yeah, no, you're fine. You're good. Go get in your car and drive. No, not in any way, shape, or form.
So let's talk about a couple things.
Let's talk about a couple things.
Let's unpack this a little bit.
Do me one favor.
Yeah.
Take the mic about 1 inch away.
1 inch away. Okay.
Yes, because you get all excited.
All right. So I do. I get a little excited when I
know.
talk about these things because these things are important.
Absolutely.
And it's not just rah, go weed.
Right.
Listen, I know why I consume cannabis. In part because it's impairing.
Right.
And I don't mean to use impairing in a negative way, but it affects our brain. We don't use cannabis so that because it does nothing to
Right.
us. We use cannabis because it does affect us, right? So let's start with that basic proposition. It affects us.
Amen.
Period. Right? I, like you, have definitely been in not many, but definitely in situations where I think to myself, oh, I'm high. There's no way I'm getting myself in a car. I actually joke about my $22 Jimmy John's sandwich. Jimmy John's is 2 blocks from my house. I was stoned one night. I craved a Jimmy John's, and I'm not a big muncher, but I craved a Jimmy John's sandwich. Could I have driven 2 blocks away? I guess.
Possibly.
Possibly. Could I have walked? Probably. But so I just, did the Grubhub, got a sandwich delivered. A tip later was $22. But you know what? How much did I save on a potential DUI?
Well,
if you will. Because there was no way I was getting in my car.
Right.
I know I definitely knew that I was too impaired, to drive at that time. There's no way I was going to get myself in the car. So I really want to start off with really going back to the premise of we use cannabis for a reason. Because I've heard a lot of people say, I drive better stoned.
I've heard that many times.
What do you mean? When you say stoned, what are you referring to? Are you referring to your eyes are about to shut and you're so tired you're about to go to sleep? Because I know you're not driving more safely when you're,
No, you're not.
that stoned. But are you talking about, you had, 3 puffs off a joint and
Right.
4 hours later you're cool, calm, and collected and you drove and you drove safely, safely, if you will.
Right.
Okay, I get that.
Yeah, I understand that.
I get that. But, what does stone mean?
That's
AJ,
totally subjective.
AJ, you have to remember, and I know you do remember, as law enforcement, what do you do when you arrest somebody for a DUI, whether it's a drug or an alcohol? You have to articulate
Yes.
What? Facts.
Absolutely.
That support what?
The impairment.
The impairment.
Absolutely.
That support probable cause
Yes.
of a crime having been committed. So what law enforcement just doesn't look at a person and say, you're stoned, or, what's typical is this. Law enforcement pulls you over for a traffic violation. Typically a traffic violation is swerving or your lights aren't on at night. There's a traffic violation, not just a little one. Sometimes it's a little traffic violation.
Totally.
But a lot of times it's, real traffic violation. So there's the first clue. There's, swerving a bit too much 3 or 4 times. And
Speed.
That's, there's
Sometimes
speed too.
sometimes it's slower though.
You know,
it's impeding traffic as opposed to driving too fast on weed.
Exactly. So you got the traffic violation, which allows you to do the stop. But then what typically then happens is the person rolls down their window, or the cop goes to the window and smells not fresh weed,
Right.
burnt weed, suggesting that the person was either smoking in their car right before or sometime pretty close to in time proximity. Then what typically you also have is the officer then, for whatever, has a valid search, thinks there's a valid search, and the person has red eyes. Maybe they're not slurring because that's not a weed thing, if you will, weed behavior. Slurring's not necessarily weed behavior, but red eyes is a symptom.
An indication.
An indication, eyes being closed a little bit, your body and clothes smelling like cannabis, your car smelling like cannabis. And then if you're unlucky enough to where you actually have, for example, a pipe in your car and the pipe feels warm.
Plain view.
And why does the pipe, and if it's in plain view especially, but if the pipe feels warm and then in the pipe there's actually burnt marijuana suggesting that you had just consumed. So what my point was, it's a totality of circumstances.
Yes.
And while law enforcement still utilize the field sobriety testing, I think that's because that's what they think should happen with any sort of roadside impairment, if you will. But to be clear, if you actually look at NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Association, and all their reports on DUIs, even the field sobriety testing doesn't, suggest impairment to certain percentages, but it's not a, hey, if you fail, you are impaired, period. That's it. It's a totality of circumstances.
Yes.
So let me be clear. When I said earlier that I have in fact signed off on summons and complaints, those summons and complaints do not include just one fact.
Right.
It is red-eyed, person smells like weed, the pipe's in the car, there's burnt weed in the car, an accident or major traffic violation. It's a totality.
Yes.
So it's not just one thing.
Yes.
Not at all.
And I go off of the belief, and again, having been trained in Arizona, I do personally believe that there are absolutely the DUI hawks out there that just go after nothing but DUIs. But for the most part, they're very, very well trained. Again, I'm not a believer that they all believe that, you just had a joint a month ago, so you are stoned. But they're very, very well trained. They follow the protocol. They follow the SFSTs. They follow all that good stuff. And I'm very happy that you made mention of this, that it's not just, they were speeding and they admitted to smoking a joint, so therefore they're impaired. Now, on the flip side, though, sometimes this is a hard part for law enforcement to understand, is that it is perfectly acceptable for a person to assert their rights. And I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to give legal advice, but it is perfectly acceptable for somebody to say, I'm not going to do your tests. Thank you very much.
Field sobriety test.
Yes,
absolutely
the
true.
roadside field sobriety test, not moving into after they're arrested and admin per se and all that. That stuff they have to do legally for their license and all that. But there are instances where I had to make judgment calls. Guy's doing 95 miles an hour, and he's flying down the freeway. He's in and out of traffic. I pull him over, and I do. This one was beer or alcohol, and I smelled alcohol. And it's a judgment call. The guy says, I'm not doing any of your tests. It's like, I have a judgment call to make right now. Do I arrest him or do I let him go? Well, based upon his admission of using alcohol and his driving behavior, my training and experience told me that I did have enough and I arrested him. And the guy was a .18 or something like that. He was blown out of his mind. Yeah. But it was not just, okay, well, all right, you told me no, so have a nice night. It is the totality of the circumstances. It is the visual, what the officer sees and smells and hears and all that type of stuff.
Yeah, and in reality, yes, you are correct that you could, in fact, deny field sobriety testing. You could say, thank you very much, officer, but I'm not interested in following your pen, and no, I'm not going to get out of the car and do the walk and turn. And to be clear, there is no science that suggests. So first off, number one, even for an alcohol DUI, you could refuse those tests.
Yes.
Number one. Number two, when it comes to cannabis, there is no science behind that suggests that those field sobriety tests have anything to do with determining whether or not somebody is impaired because of cannabis.
Right.
Alcohol, yes, and even again with alcohol, it's not even 100%. It's
80%, I think.
Depending on the test, like the HGN test, it's 70 to 80%, something like that. So all that being said, again, totality of circumstances, refusal for the field sobriety testing. And in reality, if you don't do the field sobriety testing, you're right, a police officer has less facts that they could articulate for probable cause for an arrest. That is typically true. But if a police officer using their judgment, looking at the totality, the person slurring, red eyes, all that sort of stuff. But again, that's alcohol. And cannabis looks very different when it comes to a DUI.
Agreed.
It looks very different. But I'll tell you right now, AJ, what law recently also passed that is causing a lot more people to be pulled over in general now?
What's that? Just all of it?
The cell phone.
Oh, yeah, valid point.
Cell phone law.
People are stuck staring at their phones as they're driving down the road.
Yep, and forgetting that it's now a traffic infraction.
It's a primary stop.
That could allow them to be pulled over. So a lot of people who weren't being pulled over before are now being pulled over just because of the cell phone law. So you're getting a lot. And what else, passed at around the same time, the cannabis law.
Yeah.
So a lot more people have cannabis in their car, are using cannabis and are now being pulled over a little bit more often. Makes sense?
Oh, it makes total sense. So. But the people who are on their freaking cell phones are more of a threat and dangerous. Jesus, I almost get wiped out by them daily.
100%.
Oh, my God, that's so annoying.
Well, I think there is science and report that says something like being distracted by your cell phone is akin to a DUI, to being impaired. Yeah, there is science behind that, actually. So that's insane. You're right. So then you want to add all those things together. God, I had this one young guy cited for the cell phone, speeding, DUI. And I mean speeding, I mean like over 100. Gotcha. And a DUI and then something else. And I just remember thinking, man, anything else? Did you have a hooker in the car too? Oh my God.
An underage hooker at that.
Yeah, seriously. Who was an immigrant.
Oh, Lord. Oh, God. Now we're getting all of it.
Not funny. But, I mean, one thing after another, just, wow.
Yeah.
Anything else, sir? Jesus. Sweet baby Jesus.
So on that note, I cannot recall the specifics. Again, I've been out of the game too long. Something happened that was essentially, if you refuse SFSTs on the side of the road, again, we're not talking about the breath, blood, or other bodily substance later on at admin per se, but if you refuse SFSTs, it's something akin to the fact that it could potentially show that the person is guilty. Not necessarily guilty. I'm using the wrong term here. It was a challenge to the courts. And I can't, if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm not articulating it well at all. But basically it was stated that if the person says no, they're not going to do the SFSTs, they must know they're impaired. And they must.
What you're talking about is the inference, the legal inference. Yes. that a jury could then infer that the person was impaired. But to be clear, there are way too many good defense attorneys out there that have dealt with and handled that matter. Okay. And a good defense attorney will, like I said, get rid of all FSSTs at a good evidentiary motion to suppress hearing.
Good.
But to be clear, you could refuse it and it will not be held against you. It's where we are currently in the law in Arizona. Yep.
Yeah, no, I'm a huge fan. And even when I was working, I was a huge fan of people asserting their rights. That never offended me. And we as American citizens should protect our rights and should understand our rights.
And should assert our rights. But
Absolutely.
We should also not drive while impaired.
Oh, 100%.
Let's start there.
Amen. And it's all too often, though, that I remember cops would get so pissed off if somebody didn't want to talk to them. After you Mirandize them and then say, would you like to answer my questions? And be like, no, thank you. And I never once had anybody tell me to go fuck myself or anything like that. They would just either stop talking or would just not want to talk. And I was like, okay. But then again, an officer who's well trained in their craft would have all that they need before they even got to that point. And
Absolutely.
they would not be relying strictly on the person's confession after that. They would have their facts and everything before then, and that would just add, icing onto the cake, so to speak.
Yeah.
But too many cops got so pissed off at that. What's wrong? You don't want to talk to me? And just would get all puffy and pissed off about it. And I never agreed to that. I was like, all right, well, you're an American citizen. Assert your rights.
And you should assert rights. And I kind of made the joke, hey, well, just don't drive stone or just be safe and responsible. But the reality is there are a lot of people that do get pulled over for no reason at all.
Yes.
That is also true. And
Yes.
those and those people and everybody else need to assert their rights. But don't go drive around drunk and then, cry foul.
Right.
Either. Assert your rights. I hope I'm not, I want to make sure that I'm making my point clear.
You're not.
Assert your rights, but also be safe and responsible. For the love of Jesus, be safe and responsible first and foremost.
Yes.
And if you have to and come across law enforcement, assert your rights. Be respectful. Again, for the most part, law enforcement does the right thing.
Agreed.
But
Agreed.
are there law enforcement individuals that will pull over people for no reason?
Yes,
fuck
there
with
is.
people, violate their rights? Absolutely, 100%. I'm not saying that doesn't exist. So 100% assert your rights when you have to. But also be safe and responsible is the key point I'm trying to really make clear.
I'm a huge fan of, have you heard of the, out of California, the Pot Brothers at Law? Have you heard of those guys, the shut the fuck up guys?
Yeah.
I totally believe in everything that they teach. They teach not telling the cop to shut the fuck up, but you shut up. You stop talking. I've said it before. People would talk themselves into handcuffs all day long. It's like if they would have stopped and not even asking questions, there's the excited utterances that, often people give and all that good stuff, even after Miranda. They just start talking. And next thing you know, it's like, dude, I had nothing until you just gave me everything. And now guess what? Now you're under arrest. And it's the sort of thing where, and you and I had taught some classes a couple years ago, pre-COVID and all that good stuff regarding, interactions with law enforcement and what your laws are. And the thing that I always tell people is say the least amount possible.
Yes.
You don't need to keep talking.
You should say, here's my ID, officer. Thank you very much.
Yes.
And I have no desire to answer your questions.
Have a great day. And I can be respectful.
Nothing wrong with that.
There's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with if the officers, again, I'm not giving legal advice. I'm giving my own personal experiences. I'm not speaking for any law enforcement in any way, shape, or form. I'm speaking from my own personal experience that it's totally fine to say, officer, I respect you. I'm no threat to you, but I just don't want to talk to you. I'm going to sit here quietly and you do your thing, whether it's a ticket or a warning, and I'll sit here and wait for you.
Yeah.
And hopefully the officer can respect that.
Yeah.
So.
And sometimes things go sideways.
Yes.
And, and things go sideways. That's when you call me or people like Tom Dane.
That's when you call a good criminal defense attorney and say, here's the situation.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And we try to unravel it, unpack it, and defend it and do our best to minimize the damage that it's going to do to that person's life, because that is the reality. Earlier in the show, and not trying to go off topic, but earlier in the show, you had mentioned how some criminal defense attorneys could defend certain individuals. The reality is, everybody needs an attorney. Everybody deserves an attorney. And if our role is to essentially minimize the impact, so instead of 20 years to life, we're getting them a solid stipulated 15. That's what we're doing to defend them.
Agreed. And again, my mindset has changed because I'm no longer in the law enforcement world. My mindset has changed too, that regarding drugs in general, I don't believe in people should be labeled as criminals simply for the use of illicit substances. I believe that they should be, again, this has changed. My mindset has changed. Now, if you are, getting so stoned, not necessarily stoned, but let's say heroin or whatever, that where you're passed out and your kids are neglected and there's all that type of stuff. There's other laws. There's other laws in effect. There's neglect. There's abuse. There's, assault. There's all those types of things, but not necessarily the drug. I think now that person needs help more than they need to be criminalized.
Absolutely.
So, but we don't have the money, the funding, the resources, or anything like that to, on a grand scale, get these people off of it. I mean, I know, and I'm not even 100% familiar with what, drug court and those types of systems are in place. But again, I don't think people should be criminalized. Bill Murray says the greatest quote ever. I mean, the most dangerous thing about weed is being in possession of it or getting caught with it.
Yeah. The biggest problem it's going to cause is being arrested for it. Yeah, no, absolutely. So there are in state courts, there are drug courts in some of the tribal courts as well.
Okay.
But I have definitely and there are different laws. Arizona had the Prop 100 where you couldn't actually do jail time for any sort of possession of drugs except for meth.
Okay.
And then now we have states that are completely legalizing it and then offering, clinics for help and things like that. Addiction is real. There is an addiction gene, and sometimes it cannot be helped. But not all courts are on board. Not all people want to learn. Not all people care to learn. As a matter of fact, let me just take you back a few weeks ago to a program that I hosted over at ASU Law. We had a program on the law students, the cannabis law students hosted this program. It was on the Navajo hemp issue. If you're not familiar with the Navajo hemp issue, look it up. On Navajo land, basically a commission was created. They gave themselves power, and 1,200 greenhouses later, it was shut down. The Navajo Nation learned about it. It was shut down. Feds are still determining whether there's going to be federal prosecution because it wasn't just hemp. There were a lot of other things in these 1,200 greenhouses that were out of Shiprock, New Mexico. Lots going on there. You should look it up. It's absolutely fascinating. But we had the special prosecutor, Charles Galbraith, there. We had Doreen McPaul. She is the Attorney General for the Navajo Nation. We also had Mr. Vance Jackson. He is the chief prosecutor for the Navajo Nation. And they were talking about this hemp grow and the illegal hemp grow and all the issues that were created because of this hemp grow. AJ, they literally brought about 1,000 immigrants, primarily Chinese immigrants, out of the California restaurants because they were shut down because of COVID, right, and had them growing hemp. I kid you not, in Shiprock, New Mexico, in these greenhouses. I mean, they were full on.
Wow.
There. But what I want to talk about is one of the students asked a question to the Navajo Nation prosecutor. And on the Navajo Nation, marijuana is illegal. They were looking at maybe growing hemp for industrial purposes.
Is hemp also illegal?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
They were looking at growing it for industrial purposes, but in general, illegal. Okay. So an ASU student says or asked essentially about the medicinal use as respects opiates. So he said something along the lines of, hey, studies show that cannabis can actually be a gateway off of opiates. And he asked if the Navajo Nation individuals knew that, if people on the Navajo Nation knew that and other things like that, would they change their mind about cannabis? And the chief prosecutor, and so to be clear, I absolutely respect the Navajo Nation and their laws and what they want to do. But and I'm not saying anything negative about the chief prosecutor, but he made a comment that just, I think shocked everybody, definitely shocked me. And the comment was something like he was offended that at the theory that education about cannabis would change the Navajo Nation's people on the Navajo Nation, and that it would change their mind. They know about it. They are educated enough to know they don't want cannabis on their res. Period. And I thought that was interesting for that gentleman to say, even with education, they wouldn't change their mind. Because I thought, isn't education? I think it's okay to have education, then not change your mind.
Understood. Yeah, completely.
But, so
that's your choice.
It was a little different. It was a little different. I wasn't expecting that, but I respect that he made it clear that for 20, 25 years, cannabis has brought to the attention of the nation, and the nation, with the input of elders and other individuals, say no. And I respect that as well. It's not for their nation. It's not for their nation, period. Agreed. And actually afterwards, I talked to some individuals, including Navajo individuals, who said there is actually an old story, if you will, a superstition, if you will, that there is going to be a green plant of the earth that is going to come into the nation and at first seemingly appear very beneficial. Okay. And then completely ruin the nation. Really? And they think it's cannabis. Okay. I respect that.
It's their culture.
It's what the Navajos, believe. And I respect that. A little off put by the education comment, but right. I thought that was neat. And if if there seemingly is, the superstition about this green plant, hey, I get it. Yeah. They had a lot of other superstitions that came true. So I get it. Yeah. And if that's where it comes from, I absolutely respect that.
Yeah, you have to respect that. That's what their beliefs are.
Yeah, but look up the hemp Navajo thing. Okay. There's a lot going on right now, and there may be some individuals that are going to be prosecuted federally, including someone who tried to run as president just a few years back.
No kidding.
that created this whole thing.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. Did they see that part of the country? Why did they choose that part of the country? Is that where they're from?
So Shiprock and surrounding areas of Shiprock is basically the middle of nowhere.
Yes, I've driven through a long time ago.
Because quite frankly, my first thought when I was told the story that all of a sudden they found the greenhouses and there's 1,200. My thought is, how in the effing Jesus could you not see 1,200 greenhouses being built? Like, really? You all didn't figure it out till they were built?
Right.
But then after talking to people looking at their location, I realized, yeah, it really is in the middle of nowhere.
There's nothing out there.
You unless you drove miles and miles out, and why would you?
Right.
Even law enforcement, why would you?
They have no reason for calls of service. They're not going out there for anything.
Exactly. But then all of a sudden, the residents in Shiprock were like, "There's a lot of Asians here. Why are there so many Asians?"
That's
here?
very interesting. Maybe they thought that, again, because they were in the middle of nowhere, that they wouldn't get caught.
So yeah,
Interesting.
that's a little bit of cannabis in Indian country. That's what it was called. Our program at ASU Law.
Okay.
Cannabis in Indian country.
But now, on the state side, it's legal in New Mexico. So
Yeah,
how is that
just
going
recently.
to affect? I mean, I understand that the tribes are their own sovereign nations, but do you foresee that as changing anything regarding on the nation?
Not necessarily,
No.
because in Arizona is adult use now, and in Arizona there are 22 tribes, and out of those 22 tribes, I'm pretty positive that none are adult use.
Really?
None. Tonto Apache, I believe, did pass a resolution like they did with Medicinal Marijuana Act that they will incorporate and recognize the Medicinal Marijuana Act, so that if anybody who had medicinal marijuana was on their reservation, the tribal cops would not be doing anything about it.
Is that for their nation members
correct.
or for everybody?
For anybody. So I was comfortable enough, if I ever had to go up to Tonto for work and work in the tribal courts, I was comfortable enough to actually go to the dispensary before.
Okay.
And then drive on the res, just keep it in my car.
Yeah.
In the bag, versus any other reservation. If there was a dispensary in the city close by that I wanted to go to, I'd make sure I went to the dispensary after.
Yeah.
Getting off the res, because I do know that there were actually some. I know one particular nation, and it stopped doing this, supposedly stopped civil forfeitures of vehicles of medical marijuana patients.
Oh my God.
That was a few years back. So they were actually civilly forfeiting your car if you were on the res. They found, cannabis. They had the right to, and they did.
Would you be willing to say what nation that was? You don't have to.
Yeah, no, let's put it this way.
I'm
It was in the Fountain Hills area. So if you were ever driving down from Mason.
So I can say that could potentially be Fort McDowell, or it could be Salt River people. We'll leave it at just generalities.
We'll just leave it in a general sense.
There's a few that are in the area. Oh my God, that's insane.
So tribes were not necessarily, but you have to understand they have a different background,
yes.
a different history,
yes.
and they don't need substances in their communities that they don't need. And if they want to keep it out, absolutely, it was their right to keep it out. But I think that a lot of indigenous people don't know this. A lot of people go to the casinos with their weed, with their vape pens. A non-native is not going to have any issue. Non-native, gets called by the cops stateside. They go home with their weed. A native, me, pretend I'm at a casino. I have my marijuana on me. Oh, I'm being arrested. I'm being prosecuted in tribal court for possession of marijuana. And I've had a host of cases involving indigenous individuals that have their marijuana and they're at the casino, and for whatever reason, they come into contact with law enforcement, and now they're being charged with possession of marijuana in tribal courts. So I say, and I remind tribes of this, that the only individuals that could actually get criminalized for personal possession of marijuana are indigenous people in Arizona.
On indigenous land.
On indigenous land.
They're on their own land. Wow, that's insane.
And so, to each his own.
Yeah. It's the rules of their tribe, though.
Yeah.
And people need to understand as well that all casinos are on a reservation of some type, or on tribal land. There's none of them that are not on tribal land. So
correct. Although there's now sports betting in Arizona,
that's true.
that is off res.
I won't confirm or deny if I partake in a little bit. $2 bets here and there.
I heard there's a lot of apps, and you could take a couple of weeks to get through those apps with free money.
Yes,
that's what I heard.
Nice. So I wanted to shift gears a little bit to the family law side, and regarding you had a fairly big case recently that went all the way up to the Court of Appeals. Not you personally. It moved.
The Lindsay R matter.
Yes, and I've spoken to her. I've spoken to her, and I've also spoken. I haven't spoken on record with her, but I've spoken to her. She's going to come on, and I've also spoken to Julie Gunnigal about the case as well a little bit. But you represented her initially, correct?
So the Lindsay R case. This is the legal issue is whether or not a pregnant woman who has a valid medical marijuana license could use medical marijuana during her pregnancy and as a result, not get put on the central registry for neglect. Specifically, what I mean with neglect is under Title VIII, there is a definition of neglect, and that definition includes a baby being in utero being exposed to one of many substances, and on that list is marijuana.
Okay.
That's true. That never changed. But what did change was the Medical Marijuana Act was passed, and there are different women who, for various reasons, would use their medical marijuana during pregnancy. Lindsay R. Let me tell you about the Lindsay R matter. So Lindsay was actually, I knew Lindsay before she became an investigator for the Department of Child Safety.
That's something. I mean, people know that there was this case going through the court, but they don't understand the fact that she worked for the organization.
And she was an investigator.
Yes.
This is exactly the work that she did. So I actually knew her before that. So when time came, she used marijuana during pregnancy, and she used it for a violent illness that she had. I can't even pronounce it, but it's essentially you throw up to where you could actually die. Ugh. So she's using the marijuana to control that. Little Silas is born, and God, he's big now. He's a big boy, and the baby gets tested at birth, and he's positive. The Miyacombe is positive for marijuana, and that's essentially how they do it at the. If there's a belief that the baby was exposed, and there's various medical reasons why professionals would think that a baby is exposed, including a red flag from the OBGYN.
Okay.
Sometimes the OBGYN will tell the hospital, hey, test the baby because the mom is a user, whatever. So that happens. She's investigated. The DCS doesn't get in her life in the sense that they don't take her baby.
Okay.
But they do send her a letter saying, it's been found substantiated that you neglected this child. Why? There's weed in the baby. The baby was born with weed in the system. That's neglect, period. So you have a right to appeal that substantiation finding by DCS, because that substantiation finding puts you on the central registry for 25 years as what I call it the naughty parent list.
Right.
A list of parents who have abused or neglected their children. You're on the list for 25 years. You can't get a fingerprint clearance card or.
So to be clear, though, they were not criminally prosecuting her.
Correct.
She did not have criminal charges against her. She was not in fear of going to prison or going to jail or anything like that.
Correct.
So they, and I was going to actually, and I don't mean to, I wanted to, so there was a reason why they tested the child at birth.
Correct.
So they don't just test every child.
That is absolutely correct. They do not test every child's poop for drugs.
So someone somewhere along the line said, hey, go test this child. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And the baby's born, and there's the weed in the poop.
Okay.
THC in the poop. There you go. DCS is in your life.
Gotcha.
The minute that happens, DCS is at the hospital, at your bedside, talking to you and asking you. But here's the problem with that. The minute DCS is in your life, you think they're going to ask you only about weed?
Nope. Nope. Not at all.
They find out everything else. But for the most part, they substantiate that she neglected the child, which leads to her being put on the Central Registry of Arizona, which causes you can't get a fingerprint clearance card. So anything that requires a fingerprint clearance card for work, it ain't happening for you.
Any health care.
Teacher working with children, nothing at all. So DCS, being an employee for DCS, so she lost her job.
Wow.
As well. You could appeal, and then your case gets heard at the hearing office. It's the Court of Administrative Hearings.
Gotcha. It's an administrative judge.
Administrative judge.
Gotcha.
But the way administrative law works is this. Even if the judge rules in your favor, so what happens is we have the hearing, and let me tell you, at this hearing, I talked to the Attorney General, who's on the other side, and the Attorney General says, Sonia, I just want to thank you for appealing this. This is the first appeal where anyone's actually showed up for the hearing, and we want to know what the law is as well.
Okay. All right.
And I remember looking at the AG thinking, are you joking? You don't know what the law is?
It's never been tested.
And as a matter of fact, one of the agency's initial thoughts or position was that the Medical Marijuana Act didn't even apply to it at all.
Really?
Like, it was the one agency in Arizona that it did not apply to. So, there was that, and she thanked me. She's like, let's get a ruling. So we get a ruling, and the judge ruled in Lindsay's favor, saying, hey, there are the Medical Marijuana Act applies, and there are protections, and we think the protections apply, so no, she should not be put on this registry. What happens is that decision gets sent over to the agency, and the agency has 20 days to affirm or deny that decision. So, of course, department was like, oh, hell no, and reversed the decision. So our official decision out of that court is from the agency, because the agency gets to overrule.
Okay.
It's agency discretion. That's admin law. That's admin law in Arizona. That's admin law anywhere. It's agency discretion. Unless the agency really did wrong, clearly did wrong, no, agency wins. So we get the decision basically saying, sorry, Lindsay, you're going to be put on registry. Well, you could appeal admin decisions to Superior Court. So that's what we did. We appealed it, and the judge is still the same judge, Daniel Kiley.
The same administrative judge that was at the appeals court?
No, Superior Court judge.
Okay,
so
Superior Court.
This order got appealed to Superior Court,
okay.
And there's a Superior Court judge that does that rules on these matters, and that is Judge Daniel Kiley. He is still the Superior Court judge that is ruling on lower court appeals from admin, as well as from justice courts.
Okay.
So Judge Kiley basically, in his ruling in Superior Court, in the Lindsay R. matter, says Medical Marijuana Act does in fact apply to the agency, number one. But number two, a woman is protected only if their use of medical marijuana was being monitored and complied and administered by a doctor.
That's not possible.
Absolutely not possible. So, and that was argued. So at that point, she lost and it got reversed.
Okay.
So they're about to put her on central registry. At that point, I'm not an appellate attorney. I'm a litigator.
Gotcha.
So I couldn't do anything anymore. Thank God, Allison Stein of Normal.
Yep.
Allison Stein of Normal, she's a liaison in many different ways, in the sense she knows the community, she knows legislators, she knows lawyers, and she knew Julie Gunnigal.
Yep.
And was able to pull Julie Gunnigal in and pull a whole bunch of other nationwide departments and agencies in to write appellate briefs. On March 30 or 31st of this year, we got the Lindsay R. Court of Appeals decision, which essentially, in a nutshell, says this. If a pregnant medical marijuana patient is using marijuana during pregnancy, they are protected from being on the central registry list, because the use of marijuana is like using any other medicine. So,
hallelujah for parents that use, for pregnant females that use medical marijuana.
You would think so, right? No. We're not done, AJ. No, we're near done. There's 2 more parts, 2 more steps. So let's continue this. So I have another case in front of Judge Kiley right now, almost the exact same, except in my opinion, the case that I have right now, it's called the Journey D case in Superior Court. Same thing. Pregnant woman uses weed for significant issues. Her records, I think, are far more detailed in terms of monitoring and compliance when it comes to the use.
Okay.
So she talked to every single doctor she had.
Okay.
Every doctor.
She was open and
about
honest with it.
Blah, blah, blah,
Gotcha.
blah, blah, blah. They gave her advice, blah, 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 all this, all that. We go to the admin court, and the judge actually rules against her.
Oh,
and of course, DCS was like, yeah. So DCS affirms that decision. We appeal it to Superior Court. Judge Kiley's, the judge. I prepare my opening brief sometime in February of this year. And I say something like, Your Honor, I'd love for the Lindsay R. decision to come down because, I think that could be controlling it. And I prepare my opening brief. A few weeks later, the Lindsay R. decision comes down. So, AJ, what do I do when that happens?
Run into court and say, look.
I run over to the AG and say, look.
Yeah.
Yeah. I say, hey, look, the decision came out. Could we go ahead and end this now for Journey D? Give her, take her off this list. Let's close this case. Be done. The AG goes, not so fast, Miss Martinez. God. That's not what the ruling means. And I said, well, what does the ruling mean? Do I get an answer? Of course not. So what do? I call the press.
Okay.
Or I get individuals to call the press, and we get to the press, and David out of the Tucson Weekly.
Dave Abbott.
Yep. Dave Abbott writes a great article, quotes me, and talking about the frustrations of Department of Child Safety and that they haven't provided a position statement. What do they think Lindsay R means? And I'm saying, well, what do you think it means? Because here's what I think it means. And if it means what I think it means, you all need to dismiss this. We win, okay?
Yeah,
y'all need to
100%.
stop. Nope. We go in front of Judge Kiley just recently, and I tell Judge Kiley, look, Lindsay R came down. I don't want to waste my client's money and have to prepare additional briefing. That's ridiculous, blah, blah, blah. And Judge Kiley's just smiling like, okay. Anyway, last Friday, actually Friday, just a few days ago.
Okay.
I get an email from the AGs, and the AG says, hey, Miss Martinez, we're going to go ahead and, let's stipulate. We're good. You're right. I mean,
Nice.
Not necessarily you're right. He didn't say that. He didn't say that. He didn't go that far. He didn't go that far. But he did say, we understand your position. We agree with your position on this particular matter. And, we'll go ahead and dismiss. We will not put her on the registry. And so that's what's happening right now.
Very cool.
But basically, and I'm not sure where they're going to go with it. I'm not sure if they're going to appeal Lindsay R. I'm not sure where they are, but you know what? They're getting rid of this case, and I'm happy for that, but I'm still not sure where they're at.
And correct me if I'm wrong, though, they still could, even though they stipulated at this moment, they still could file an appeal.
Absolutely.
They still could take it to the State Court of Appeals. Right,
on the Lindsay R case. Yeah. So I don't know why they're doing what they're doing on this case now. I'm happy about it.
Yeah, 100%.
I appreciate it. I'm just not sure where they are. Because realistically, do I think that any Department of Child Safety is going to be okay with a ruling that says women could use weed during pregnancy?
No.
We're not there yet with society yet.
We're not.
Could we at some point? Yeah, and this may be the start of it, in the sense that this case may get rid of those stigmas.
May start
to get rid of some of that stigmas. But does anybody want pregnant women using any substance that is impairing in a general sense? No.
It's a hard thing to understand and comprehend.
That's also true for pharmaceuticals.
Yes.
And I'm not talking about just illicit substances. I'm talking about even for pharmaceuticals, people,
Yes.
and you know what I mean? Even needed pharmaceuticals. It's like, wow, they're on,
There's a stigma associated with it.
Yeah.
Well, 100%. How is it going to affect the unborn child?
Yeah.
And there's not, the science isn't there yet.
Yeah. There's definitely some science there, but is there a lot of science? No, of course not. Because we haven't studied it. Let's not kid ourselves. But in reality, just taking a realistic step back view, Department of Child Safety, I could see that they would appeal it.
I could see they could appeal it too.
But they only have a few more days, and let's see how it goes, and let's see how they view it. I really, like I said, would like an idea of what they think the decision means, and how it could happen. Because as I said, out of Lindsay R came the idea that as long as the doctor was monitoring compliant, you were compliant and administering it. Because what I did was I took that language and used it in admin court asking DCS, could you explain to me, Ms. Caseworker or Ms. Investigator, what does a doctor administering medical marijuana mean? Does that mean that the doctor rolls the joint and lights the joint for them while they're in the room? Does that mean that the doctor gets the Rick Simpson oil and puts it in their mouth? Because I don't know if you know this, but before Rec Pass, unless the doctor was an actual medical marijuana patient themselves, they couldn't possess marijuana. How is a doctor who cannot possess the damn drug, administer the drug, especially a doctor who's not competent,
Right.
with respect to the endocannabinoid system? They think that's the only thing not taught in med school, right? The endocannabinoid system is what some doctors say. Like, we're taught every system except the endocannabinoid system.
I have a friend whose son just became a DO, so he went through full-blown medical school and all that. And I said, did you learn about that? He goes, I don't even know what you're talking about. I'm like, you're a fucking doctor now and you have no idea. Like, and it's not his fault. It's the school's fault.
Yeah.
I wish these rulings would come with okay, so we're going to rule in favor of Lindsay, and we're going to mandate that DCS gets educated. I wish that was the follow-on part. And I'm not saying anything bad about DCS. They have a place, but they need education.
Absolutely.
They need you've got the meth head parents that are doing nothing but smoking meth and, throwing their kids outside. So that's where they need to step in, but they need education.
Yeah. For example, any investigator that I've ever questioned in terms of marijuana and the pregnancy issue is, do you have any medical background and training? Do you know how marijuana affects unborn children, fetuses? Do you know at all? No.
So,
So they're just an assumption?
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're just an assumption. And I get it. It's a little baby growing. You want the woman to, be eating spinach, not
Right. It is green and it is a plant. So, I mean, you could go that route. The one thing, though, in no defense of anything, just a simple explanation, it has also been my understanding that, because I did work with DCS, they are so overworked and so undertrained and so underpaid. And this was my understanding of the process. I don't remember if level 3 was the highest level of investigator or level 1 was the highest level of investigator. I don't remember. But I do know that only the highest level of investigators used to be allowed to pull kids from homes. But because of the turnover rate and they're just so underfunded and understaffed, they had to start allowing the lowest level trained investigators to be able to pull kids from homes without the training, without the experience, without the knowledge, and without the background. So that's caused a lot of problems.
It's changed. Let me tell you something.
Okay. And again, I'm speaking from
let me
several
tell
years
you,
ago.
There's a good change because the agency decided to start to follow laws, specifically warrant laws.
That's good.
Yeah, warrant laws. Remember those?
Yeah, I do.
So the Ninth Circuit, a long time ago, basically it essentially ruled that if DCS was going to remove a child, they needed a warrant.
That's news to me. Did not know that.
And now Arizona is now following that.
That's outstanding.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, it used to not be like that.
Not at all.
They could come and do an interview with you.
Past 2 years?
Okay. Yeah.
I've seen many warrants.
I've been out 5 years. So.
Warrant for removal, not just a regular removal. It's warrant for removal. Yeah.
Yeah. They could. Yeah. It used to be if they came into your house and at that moment.
Yep. Nope.
They could take your child.
Nope. No, unless it's an emergency like your kids.
Right.
You're talking warrant now. Yep.
Very cool.
Arizona has definitely changed that. Yeah. And going back to the cannabis in particular. If cannabis is the only issue, and in general they're safe, people are safe and responsible, but DCS is going away. DCS is not in your life for cannabis and cannabis only. They're not. They are not.
And that's the sort of thing where it comes
unless you're pregnant.
Yeah, you're right. Unless you're pregnant, then you got a whole. You're going to go to administrative court. I'm just kidding. But that's the one thing also to teach that parents need to understand as well, that you need to have your stuff locked up. You need to have your stuff. When you go to the dispensary. And this is the thing that I throw my stuff in the trunk. You don't have it exposed to your kids. Don't be smoking in front of your kids all the time or anything like that.
Yeah.
If you need to go smoke during the middle of the day, go out back. Leave your kids inside.
And have age-appropriate conversations.
There you go.
Age-appropriate.
Yes.
Age-appropriate, because the theory is not to necessarily hide things, but to keep them safe, just like you would keep any medication safe. Safe drawers. My pharmacy drawer, not that it actually has pharmaceuticals. I think the word, ibuprofen 600, right?
Tylenol and aspirin.
But aside from that, it's they're on the top shelf.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Edibles, you got to be careful with. I've had too many people parents not be safe and responsible with their edibles, keep them out on lower shelves or having parties where they're inviting other people that include children and they just don't put their edibles away. They forget to for whatever reason, because maybe they're just not used to it, because they don't have kids, And so there's a lot of that. Again, going back to the safe and responsible use, just make sure you be mindful, keep things away, label things. That sort of thing, and have age appropriate conversations. When I say that because I've also known judges in family court to suggest that you shouldn't talk to your children at all about marijuana.
And I disagree with that wholeheartedly.
There's a fine line, and when you are dealing with issues in custody court, you have to be very careful, and really, if marijuana is an issue, you really should go to an attorney who knows a little bit more about marijuana than just your average family custody lawyer, because there are special rules, like you said. Putting things away, locking things away, storing them in certain places, having so much paraphernalia. Your average mother or father shouldn't have 6 different bongs.
Right.
I mean, don't get me wrong. You want to say fine, just keep 5 locked up and use one.
Exactly.
Because it's also impressions and assumptions. If DCS comes over to your house and you have 1 bong that's on in the closet on the top shelf, that's one thing. If you have 4 in the back of your couch. That's a whole nother thing, and that does happen. So it's judgment without knowing, and
reality and
all
the
that sort of
perception of
stuff.
reality makes up reality.
Yeah.
And if they walk in and see 10 different bongs and, wrapping paper rolling papers everywhere, rolling paper everywhere and, gummies and all that good stuff, that's going to leave a horrible impression.
Exactly.
And it's just irresponsible.
Exactly. So all that.
Not only that, I don't want kids stealing my edibles. So.
Also, they're
Shit's
expensive. It's expensive. Hell no. Because then jokingly, then the kids do, then the kid gets sick, then you got to take it to the hospital, and then
Yes.
DCS really is in your life.
And that's just irresponsible.
Yeah, 100%.
Again, nobody's going to die from it. You think you're going to die if you'd have too many edibles, but you're not going to die. You don't want your kids getting sick. You don't want them having that horrible experience.
And to be clear, let's be clear. Kids have gotten sick. There have been kids who have consumed, 3-year-old who consumed a 200 milligram chocolate bar, had a seizure. No, kids get sick.
Yes.
Are people dying? No. But so let's, again, I appreciate cannabis. I love it. I think it's a great thing, but it could be used in an unsafe and irresponsible manner, and it could hurt people. I'm never going to not say that, because it could. And I'm saying this as a person who absolutely appreciates and respects this plant. Use it the wrong way, though, it could be used the wrong way. And absolutely.
It is not for everybody.
And it absolutely not for everybody.
It is not for everybody.
Also true.
I know that there's a lot of talk about, it causes schizophrenia. Well, I'm not a scientist. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not any of those things. But I do know that there are some people that should not use it. Yeah, there are some people that should stay away from it, far away from it.
Yeah. And or people that had just I have a family member who tried it and was like, yeah, no, not interested.
Okay.
That's totally fine.
No.
Not for everybody. You're right.
So we have a time limit, and I think we hit the time limit for you. Said you got to get out of here.
All right. So we're wrapping up, huh?
We're wrapping up.
I love a part 2. This is good stuff.
I would love, and again,
lots going on.
We could talk about this offline, but I'd love to do like law and legal updates with you and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I enjoy your company as well.
Thank you.
So I consider you a friend.
Same here.
So leave us with some words of wisdom.
Be safe and responsible, folks. Be absolutely safe and responsible. What that means, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to call me. Law office is Sonia Martinez in Mesa, Arizona.
There you go. What's the phone number?
480-352-5886.
Nice. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sonia. I sincerely appreciate it.
Thank you, AJ. It's been fun.
Awesome. Let me turn all this stuff off.